Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the podcast, Decoding the Unknown. As always, I'm your host Simon. I'm here, one of my writers, in this case Kevin. Kevin has made a game for me, The Internet's Deepest Mysteries Part 6. And he says at the top, don't forget the intro video before beginning the script. Okie dokie, I had forgotten, and obviously, thank you, Kevin did need to remind me. If you're new here, I've never read this before. We're going to read it together. Let's watch the intro video.
Is this thing recording? Hello, Simon. It's been far too long since we played one of our little games, so I had to claw my way out of the basement and into your office so that... Excuse me.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Internet's Deepest Mysteries. I, as always, am your malevolent game master, Kevin. Welcome.
Whoa.
What happens if you're new here?
Kevin's face.
A number of stories for Simon about internet mysteries, and it is up to him to guess whether each one is a genuine internet mystery or a story I've concocted to fool him. In the past, each episode has contained 5 different entries, but because it's been so long since we played this game, and because you all seem to enjoy longer episodes, this time there are 10 new stories to delight, entertain, and hopefully fool some of you. So feel free to play along at home and let me know in the comments how you all did. And Simon, you might want to grab a pen to write down your guesses, since I won't be back till the end of the episode with the answers. With that said, let's jump right in.
Okay, that's cool. First of all, Kevin, you have very nice teeth. I was looking at your teeth being like, those are nice teeth. You got American's teeth. Oh, okay, so that's very nice. That's how the show works. I'm going to get something to be able to write my answers down. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Vessie. These are the Vessies that I've been wearing all of the time lately. These are Soho, right? Yes, Soho in size M9 for my very normal size feet. I don't know why I said that weird. They are just normal size. 9's a perfectly normal size for shoes. These are the Sohos. There's leather. It's not real leather. It's, what do they call it? Vegan leather? Pleather? What is the word for that? On the outside. Very much a spring shoe. I love it. 100% waterproof, by the way. That's like Vessie's thing. They make them out of something called Dymatex, which makes them breathable and waterproof and warm and somehow a perfect shoe all year round. These have been my spring pair. They've just sent me these, which is a pair of the weekend shoes, which are, I don't know, like perfect for summer. A little less leather on there, just a little bit more fabric. Very nice. Summery looking sort of khaki pattern there as well, which is lovely. The weekend was actually the first shoe that got me into Vessie. You could see this one here that I wore basically 2.5 years straight. Not bad. Not bad. These shoes really lasted. I mean, that's what happens when you wear shoes every day for, 700-800 days. I wore nothing else. It was always just this one pair of Vessies. Now I have many Vessies, which I rotate. And you should get many Vessies too by going to vessie.com/DTU, and you get an automatic 15% off your first purchase at checkout. Oh, and what's this? This is also from Vessie. It's the Westerly Coach jacket, and this time of year, it can be sunny in the morning, and then in the afternoon it's pouring with rain, and this will keep you dry while looking stylish. The Westerly Coach jacket. So don't miss out on the fun. Grab your Vessies today. And now back to today's video. Okay, let's get into it. I got my pen and paper. What I want to say is I believe, Kevin, that I have a rather good track record against you. I don't remember quite what we were at last time, but I tend to be able to guess these, unless Kevin's like, yeah, that's actually the plot of some manga that Simon's never seen, because of course I haven't. Let's go, Senor Flagrante. There's nothing quite like a trip to the city dump, I guess. I've bought tires from a junkyard before, but never been to an actual dump. This is a thing that people like to do, though, and in early 2023, one Redditor discovered multiple pallets of sealed Magic the Gathering product at his local dump, totaling over $100,000 in value. God damn! I'd find that and be like, yeah, it's obviously worth nothing because it's been thrown away, completely sealed. It always reminds me of that dude who he mined a bunch of bitcoins on his computer or whatever. He just threw the computer away, and he was searching through the tip for it because there's 100 million pounds of bitcoins on there or something nuts. Unfortunately, he didn't know what it was. He posted the story to Reddit and was informed how valuable the pallets were, but when he returned, they'd already been driven over and destroyed. That's not the actual mystery, though. According to other comments on the post, it's common for big box companies to send pallets they don't have room for to the dump instead. Is that true? God, that's so wasteful. And no, this isn't a mystery about how f***ed up late-stage capitalism must be for something like this to be common. That's nuts. They'd just throw something away that valuable just because they're like, there's no room in the warehouse today. Just chuck it all, 100 grand. Instead, we'll be looking at another discovery made by another Redditor in the spring of 2012 at a dump in Guadalupe County, Texas. Rather than stumbling upon a fortune in collectibles, it was a piece of literal trash that caught the eye of the user Rory Bellows. The object in question was an empty box of dish detergent known as Senor Flagrante. Okay. Literally, that translates to Mr. Flaming, an accusation I've heard leveled at Mr. Clean on numerous occasions, though never to his face, but figuratively, it would be more like shining or sparkling. Also, as a fun fact, Mr. Clean's official first name is Veritably. Is that true? Veritably Clean? What? They could have just gone for a better one, like really clean, if you're just going to choose a word. The name wasn't the key part of the mystery, though. This was in Texas, so products having Spanish names wouldn't have been unusual. The part that caught Rory's attention was that it was his face on the box. No way. What? It must just be someone who looks like you, Rory. At least it certainly looked like his face. He posted a picture to Reddit of himself holding the empty and somewhat damaged box, and the resemblance was undeniable. Although Senor Flagrante was an illustration, it was done in that photorealistic style that makes it look more like a touched-up photograph than an actual drawing. The box was labeled as having been manufactured in Mexico, which is hardly a surprise, but internet investigators were unable to find much information about the parent company. It definitely existed, but it seemed more like a shell company than anything else. Some references to Senor Flagrante were found online, but nothing that included product images. As far as anyone could tell, it was an obscure and extremely localized brand of dish detergent. That all left one very strange question. Why was Rory's face on the box? He wasn't even Hispanic, so why would his face be on one used for Senor Flagrante? After much deliberation, Reddit came up with two possible solutions to this mystery. I think the biggest one is it's just a coincidence. The second one is that they just Googled for an image of a dude, and for some reason, Rory, you came up, and the illustrator was just using you as a model. The first is that it was all a bizarre coincidence. There we go. Even if the image of Senor Flagrante was drawn in a photorealistic style, it still wasn't a photograph. That said, artists often use reference images for their drawings, and many times the source of the reference image is eerily identifiable. For example, everybody who's ever read a comic book illustrated by Marvel artist Greg Land can flip through the pages and go, oh, that's Jenna Jameson, that's Asia Carrera, that's Sasha Grey. Wait, really? He's just using porn stars?
What are you, a porn star?
This provides two possible ways that the image could have been entirely coincidental. Maybe, by random chance, the artist found a picture of Rory online and decided to use him as a reference image. There we go. Looks like I got both of them so far. But Kevin's lumped these into one, like, as the coincidence solution. What's the other one? I don't know what the other one could possibly be. Or maybe he just tried to imagine the perfect person to represent Mr. Flaming, and Rory's face is what happened to pop into his head. Rory never did any acting or modeling work, so of those two options, the latter is more likely. But that's assuming the photo he posted of himself with the box was even real. Although Reddit had some fun with this rabbit hole, there were many people who believed that the entire thing was just a hoax. They believed that either Rory printed a fake box or just photoshopped the image onto a different box he had, though no obvious signs of photo editing were found. Yeah, so in that case, I think he made the box, right? Like he found an obscure, like random product in another country, and then he printed up his own version of the box. I'd say that's pretty likely. Of course, there's also the other option, that none of this ever happened at all. Maybe I just threw a story about a box of dish detergent in here, because I know you'd think something so mundane had to be true, but since I know that's the sort of logic you would use, maybe I'm only drawing attention to it as a bluff to make you think that it's actually fake, because it's really the truth. That's right, Simon. I'm not just inside your office, I'm inside your head. Oh, and I'm inside your head, Kevin, because I think this is true, because I don't think you'd have included that last thing about it maybe being true, but not true, if you thought that I would think it was true. Anyone else following along? So I'm going to put number one as true. It's like a double bluff or a triple bluff or whatever. Am I the asshole? While it is now one of the top subreddits on the site with nearly 16 million users, Am I the Arsehole has been around for over 6 years on Reddit before hitting millions of users in 2019. It's since exploded in popularity, likely thanks to social distancing mandates during COVID, creating lots of questions about whether or not people were being arseholes. I now realize that I hope my random number generator doesn't put this as the first entry in this episode, because the word arsehole is probably going to be used a lot throughout this entry as a matter of necessity. Kevin from the future here, sorry this wound up seconds, but I am bound by the random number generator. That's okay, I think we can get away with arsehole like 10 minutes in. It's all good. The basis of the subreddit is simple. People pose questions about scenarios that happen to them from their perspective, and then users weigh in to give a verdict. The possible verdicts are YTA, you're the asshole, NTA, not the asshole, NAH, no assholes here, or ESH, everybody sucks here. It's a fun way to get a reality check by having strangers point out what a shitbag you're clearly being, even when you post a heavily biased version of accounts from your own warped point of view. And that's my one gripe with this subreddit. While there are some wild and entertaining stories, the answer is almost always, yes, you are a massive gaping asshole. Wait! My experience on that subreddit has been different. It's a very compelling subreddit, and there's amazing stuff on there. I'd like to make videos about some of the stuff on there. Like, maybe it could be a good brain blaze. That's another channel I do. Could be a good episode, like best Am I the Arse? Because the stories are cracking. But often it's like, no, you're not an asshole. At least the smaller ones. I guess the ones that get voted to the top are the most arsehole-y ones, so those get, upvoted. But on my Reddit homepage, these will come up, and they'll be, like, less upvoted or whatever. And people are often like, no, not an arsehole. The other person's the arsehole. People post these questions because others in their lives called them out and they wanted validation from strangers to show that they were right all along. I know that's not always the case, but I feel like 90% of the time the person posting the story is in fact the asshole. But that wasn't the case back in 2016 when user Lucky Prophet came to post about their annoying neighbors. There were two young women living together in the house across the street from Lucky. However, they weren't the ones he had a problem with. It was their boyfriends. There were constant fights at all hours of the night, and Lucky found himself calling the police multiple times to make sure things didn't get out of hand. Because this happened so frequently, Lucky began wondering if he was overreacting. Couples fight sometimes, and every time the police showed up, the fighting had already stopped. He never saw any injuries on either of the women either, so he took to Reddit to find out if he was being an arsehole by repeatedly calling the police on his neighbors. No, I don't think so. Like, I've done enough crime once to know that the police should be called in this situation, because eventually, if one of these women does file a complaint about, like, harassment or, like, assault, then there's gonna be good evidence for her, because the neighbor was calling the police all the time because of the fighting.
That's so annoying.
This was one of the rare instances in which the answer was universally that no, he was not the asshole. As is often the case with these threads, Redditors requested that Lucky provided updates to the situation. There was a lot of concern over the safety of the two women, and understandably so, despite Lucky reporting that he had never personally witnessed violence or injuries. Over the last few weeks, he posted a couple more updates with the community, as he found himself calling the police twice more during that time period. However, it was the third update that took everybody by surprise, as the domestic dispute took a very unexpected turn. Lucky was awoken one night by the sound of a woman shrieking as if her life was in danger. He ran to the window to see what was happening, and what he saw was one of the aforementioned boyfriends holding his girlfriend by the hair to drag her as he drove up and down the street. What? By the hair to drag her as he drove up and down the street. What the hell's going on? He's by his car? Once Lucky figured out what was happening, he was about to turn to call the police, but suddenly 4 or 5 unmarked black cars pulled up and surrounded the vehicle. A bunch of men in suits got out, pulled the man from his car, and threw him into one of theirs, and then drove away. Nobody was sad about this update, but it certainly raised a lot of questions which Lucky did not have answers to. After all, while this might sound like something the feds would do, the police had never even taken the men to the station for questioning or made them leave the house during any of their visits. Why would one of them be suddenly dragged away? As the Reddit community demanded answers, things only got stranger. Lucky reported that not only did he never see either man again, but the women both moved out of the house as well. There was no moving van or anything either. They just seemed to have vanished. And with that, Lucky stopped posting on the thread. Looking through his post history, Redditors were able to identify the city in New York in which Lucky lived. There was a speculation that someone had even managed to identify his street, though this was never confirmed. However, there were no newspaper articles or police reports anybody could find that had anything to do with this. Lucky had only given the first names of the people involved, so it was certainly going to be an uphill battle trying to find information anyway, but nothing could be found. This led to 3 main theories. It was all a hoax by Lucky, the boyfriends were taken away by the FBI, or the boyfriends were taken away by the mafia. I'm curious what your take is, Simon. Well, my take is, Kevin, it's a little bit cheating. I think you're cheating a little bit. Because this story can be made up by you, or it can be true, or it can be made up by Lucky. So there's 2 odds of it being made up, which I think makes it easier for you, because you could take a story that's not really believable and put it in here. But I think you probably would think that. I would think that. So I'm going to mark it as false. Even though I think it's a little bit unfair to give me whether it's true that the fake story was posted. That making sense to anyone? Regardless of whether his story was real, did Lucky really post on Reddit about witnessing someone being disappeared in the middle of the night? Or am I trying to fool you into thinking that my fabrication is the type of fake story some bored teenager might post on Reddit for attention? Yeah, exactly. It's not... It makes it hard for me. Squidward fan 1982. I genuinely have no idea whether or not you'll know the answer to this question, Simon, but who lives in a pineapple under the sea? SpongeBob SquarePants. That's right. If you don't know it yet, you certainly will in a few years when your kids are old enough to watch SpongeBob SquarePants. Fun fact, according to the show's creator, the SpongeBob theme song was specifically designed to be as loud and as annoying as possible so that kids would get excited, scream, and wake up their parents. So that's something to look forward to. Personally, I never got into the show. It premiered the year I went to college, and I wasn't a massive stoner, so there was no real reason for me to be watching a children's cartoon, unless it were originally aired in Japanese. It's a double standard. Regardless, the show has a huge fan base, including among people my age, so it's not that surprising that a YouTube channel would emerge with the username SquidwardFan1982. His channel became the stuff of legends, not because it was necessarily good, but as one of the most mysterious pieces of lost media of all time. The channel was reportedly very much what a person might expect from someone of that name. Some of it was vlog-style posts, but it was mostly a series of Let's Play videos centered around various SpongeBob video games. Some of these games are pretty popular, and Battle for Bikini Bottom nearly won Console Children's Game of the Year from the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. Sadly, it narrowly lost out to Mario Party 5, which is just incorrect. Mario Party is not a game for children, it's a game for teenagers and adults who never want to speak to each other again. Injustices aside, it was a popular enough game that there were probably some number of people watching the channel, but in 2010, Squidward Fan disappeared entirely. Their entire channel was removed from YouTube with no warning. This hardly sent waves through the internet as it was a small channel, but any fans he had would likely have had questions. No information about this surfaced until January 2015. All of a sudden, a previously anonymous YouTuber was showing up on lists and in iceberg videos. Those lists were of deceased YouTubers and highly sought after lost media, but Squidward Fan was listed in every single one. According to all of those lists, I mean, this is like according to every single one, but it's like someone probably did the research and made the original list, and then a bunch of other people copied it and used very similar thumbnails, because that's how YouTube works. According to all of these lists, Squidward Fan's real name was Nick Rapunzel, and he shot himself in the head in 2010 after intense bullying while he was in college. That timeline doesn't seem to add up, but it was also reported that despite what his username said, he was born in 1992, not 1982. However, it's hard to find any verifiable information about this. The channel was completely gone, and either the Wayback Machine never archived it, or someone requested that the archive be removed. Despite the name showing up on all of these lost media and dead YouTubers lists, they all just referenced one another. The story seemed to have no origin, with every website pointing at another, yelling he started it. But through extensive digging, the original source of this information was found. On January the 28th, 2015, user Potato ASDF is back. He updated the list of deceased YouTubers on Wikitubia, the YouTube fandom wiki, to include Squidward Fan. Potato had made a number of updates to the page, and they all seemed to check out. Not only were they all able to be verified as YouTubers who had died, but some of them were extremely obscure channels that it's shocking he would have ever found. If there was anybody who could be trusted to provide this information, it was Potato. Like, I know people have weird hobbies, but this is a weird hobby. It's like, yeah, no, I just go through and look for like dead small YouTube channels, and then I list the people who ran them as being literally dead if they are. Strange thing to be into, but you do you. And that is a very weird sentence to type, but it's the world that we live in today. It's like in 2012, when Forbes ran a headline, "Lawyer Charles Carrion suing the oatmeal." We are clearly living in some sort of dystopian nightmare where these sentences are accepted as normal, but I digress. Back to the actual mystery. Who the hell was Squidward Fan 1982, and did this channel really exist? Nobody could find any news about this story, nor could they find a single person in the entire world with the name Nick Rapunzel. That last part isn't surprising, because that clearly sounds like a bullshit name. But still, if the channel really did exist, are the stories of its owner's untimely demise true, or have the stories of his death been greatly exaggerated by me, the guy who made all of this up? I'm gonna say my vibe is that this one is true. Polybius. Unsurprisingly, I've played my fair share of arcade games. I may not have grown up near a major arcade, but back in the 1980s and 90s, nearly every pizza shop, movie theater, and even some restaurants always had at least a couple of arcade machines. I don't know if it still works like this, but back in the day, the proper etiquette for arcades was to place your quarter on the machine, leaning against the screen to reserve your place in line. Popular games like X-Men vs. Street Fighter could have a line of a dozen quarters along the screen, but somehow everyone knew which quarter was theirs, and it never caused a problem while anyone waited for their turn to lose to me. However, not everywhere was so civil. Before Before Portland was the hipster capital of the United States, losing out on the title of hipster capital of the world to Brighton and Hove in England by a single point. It's true, Brighton and Hove. It's very hip. It was the epicenter of an arcade craze known as Polybius. The game had absolutely nothing to do with the Middle Hellenistic Greek historian of the same name, but it's neat that ancient Greek names can double as futuristic-sounding video game names. Anyway, the game started appearing in arcades in Portland and its suburbs in the fall of 1981. The game was instantly addictive, sometimes resulting in fights breaking out over who got to play next. The gameplay itself sounds pretty standard, though potentially fun. It's described as being a fast-paced game involving a lot of geometric shapes and puzzle elements, but that's all that's known about it because no copy of the game seems to have survived. Arcade owners said that the machines were serviced by men in black who had no interest in the mountains of quarters their games were earning. All they came to do was collect printouts of data from the machines, believed to be recording player patterns and the effects the game had on players. And it was the effect the game had that was most interesting to people. The game was reported as having psychoactive effects on the players, sometimes inducing seizures, amnesia, and hallucinations, among other things. Oh yes, and sometimes the game straight up killed people. So that's fun. What? One former player even recalled being abducted while in a trance-like state produced from the game. Though he had vague memories of being led through a series of tunnels after playing, he remembered very little until he suddenly awoke 60 miles from his house. Now this all sounds very fake. And I can't remember if I know the name Polybius because he's a Greek historian or because I've heard of this before. It does feel somewhat familiar, which is going to sound like a crazy thing to say if this turns out to be something Kevin made up. And the fact that it does feel somewhat familiar, despite the fact that it's insane, does make me think this is real. After about 1 month of breaking people's brains and collecting data, the machines all vanished from the Portland area arcades. The mystery didn't receive more widespread attention until 1998, when an article about Polybius appeared on coinop.org, a website dedicated to archiving information about coin-operated games. From there, it spread like wildfire as people shared their own testimonials of having played the game and experiencing its psychoactive effects. The user who originally posted the article claimed to have a ROM of Polybius, but all they ever shared was the title screen. The image showed it was copyrighted 1981 by a company called Senor. The company roughly translates to sense delete, though it's not proper German. The name is also a bit on the nose for my liking, especially given the rumors surrounding the game. Because the machines were being serviced by anonymous men in black, it was believed that the game was actually created by the CIA. The prevailing theory was that it was some sort of spiritual successor to the MKUltra program trying to achieve mind control using video games rather than drugs. Unsurprisingly, the CIA has not responded to these allegations. For decades, the internet has been searching for any existing copies of Polybius, but to no avail. Many people believe the story of Polybius is just a hoax that spread across the early internet, despite the countless reports from people who grew up in the Portland area claiming to have played it. It's been argued that the game those people were remembering playing was actually Cube Quest. Cube Quest is a very trippy shoot-'em-up that has a lot of visual elements described as being in Polybius. There's even weird floating skulls in the background of the game for some reason. It was also a Laserdisc game, which meant it was particularly prone to breaking down. This resulted in many of the arcade cabinets being frequently removed from arcades after a short time. But we're not here to determine whether or not Polybius was a real game, just whether this is a real internet mystery or not. Maybe I just wanted an excuse to talk about video games and the fun times I had crushing all the challenges at X-Men vs. Street Fighter. I think this is true. It's insane, but it feels CIA. Like CIA be up to shit, right? The disappearing football player. Like many American colleges, Ohio State University is a major football school. The Ohio State Buckeyes are one of the 14 teams that make up the NCAA's Big Ten Conference, which is, of course, not to be confused with the Big 12 Conference and its 16 teams. Maybe if people who got athletic scholarships in these colleges actually went to their classes, they would be better at counting. Anyway, OSU is nice tangent, is a top football school. They were division champions every year from 2012 through 2021 and national champions in 2014. One of the team's star players couldn't just vanish without a trace without making the national news. Luckily, these teams are massive. The NCAA only allows schools to give 85 athletic scholarships to football players each year, but there's no limit on how many non-scholarship players can be on the roster. Official rosters for NCAA football teams typically range from 100 to 200 people, which means there are a lot of names on those rosters that nobody has ever heard of before. Among those names was Jay Tutus Gillett. The running back earned the nickname Tutus back on his high school team thanks to his impressive footwork with, tutus, I guess. Like, because of ballet? Impressive footwork? Tutus. with teammates saying you could dance around the defenders like a ballerina. There we go. Unfortunately for Jay, the Buckeyes were not nearly as impressed. He was small even by running back standards, and he couldn't take a hit. That was fine in high school, where nobody could lay a hands on him, but one solid tackle during a preseason scrimmage was enough to lay him out for the entire day. According to teammates, Jay was just a little guy. Assuming Simon's eyes haven't completely glazed over while I talk about football, maybe just a little bit. I'm paying attention because I want to beat Kevin. Let's get on to the actual mystery. It began in October of 2005 with a Facebook post. Jay's roommate hadn't seen him in a few days, so he posted one Monday morning asking if anyone had seen Jay. Note that this was still back when you needed a .edu email to join the site, so something like this could have easily spread across campus rather than getting buried in people's feeds by angry political rants and conspiracy theories from that one relative we all seem to have. Yeah, we don't have .edu, we have .ac.uk. And I remember I was in that time before Facebook was like public, and it was like you had to have a .ac.uk or a .edu email address to access it. And having a .ac.uk email address, or I guess a .edu, is really useful. I wonder if you could buy those, because you get all sorts of good discounts. It quickly became evident that nobody had seen him, so campus security got involved. The logical first step was to double-check the CCTV footage from the Fisher College of Business, OSU's business school. There was always the possibility that he was staying somewhere off campus, but still attending some of his classes, and if nothing else, it would help identify exactly how long he'd been missing. However, what they discovered was a bit unusual. The last footage of Jay was him entering the business school at around 1 a.m. the previous Tuesday. There were only cameras monitoring the exterior of the building, so what he was doing inside that late is unknown, but realistically, he shouldn't have been able to do much. He had entered through a set of sliding doors to the lobby, but the doors on either side of the lobby leading to classrooms should have been locked at night. The elevators were also disabled at night, so their doors were open to the lobby, but none of the buttons inside would have worked. If the building's not open, which it clearly isn't, why would the main door be open? That's weird.
It's getting weird.
And yet, despite all exits from the lobby being locked, except the sliding doors back outside, Jay was never caught on camera leaving the building. Even if the doors leading from the lobby to the rest of the building weren't locked like they were supposed to be, there still should have been no way for Jay to leave without being noticed. Allegedly, anyway. This was almost 20 years ago, so I'd wager that there were only cameras on the actual entrances and that it would be easy to escape through a window without being caught on camera. If that's what Jay did, it would certainly raise more questions than it answered, but I just want to make it clear that at no point am I entertaining the notion of anything paranormal happening here. No, that never even entered my mind. Nothing that, of course, he was taken away by ghosts. Like, come on. Let's be real. Since it had been nearly a week since anyone saw Jay and his last known whereabouts were unusual, it was time for campus security to step aside and let the actual police come and investigate. Naturally, the first thing they checked was Jay's computer. As far as his roommate knew it had remained untouched for the entire previous week, though he had spent most of the weekend in his girlfriend's dorm. However, when police attempted to access Jay's computer, it had been completely wiped, or at least as far as the officers on the scene knew. Nowadays, everyone knows you can't just delete files or reformat a hard drive and expect it to accomplish anything other than annoying the end user. You have to zero fill the drive to wipe all existing data, although even that is recoverable with expensive enough equipment. If you really want to make data unrecoverable, I recommend using a sledgehammer, followed by throwing the broken shards of the hard drive into one of those insanely powerful magnets used to wipe 64-track reel-to-reel tapes. Don't they write over the data not with zeros, but you can have it written over with nonsense stuff these days, so it truly does use up all the space, so it's not recoverable? Like, I was always told that that's the way to do it, and even like smashing it with a sledgehammer is not as effective as properly wiping a drive, right? But this was 2005, and whoever erased the computer didn't know all of that. Unfortunately, digital forensics weren't as sophisticated back then, so they couldn't recover everything from the drive. What they could get were logs showing that the drive had been wiped on Thursday afternoon while Jay's roommate was at class. Getting into the room required both a regular metal key to the specific dorm and a student ID badge to enter the building. The logs for that building's exterior scanner showed that Jay's ID wasn't used to enter the building that day, though it would have been easy to just have someone else hold the door open for you. Facebook pages of OSU students continued to be filled with requests for information, theories, and speculation for months, but eventually this mystery faded into the background. As far as I can tell, police never found any leads, and Jay is officially still listed as a missing person. But is that as far as I can tell because it's all the information that's available, or because I made this story up and I simply can't tell you that? I don't think you made... My gut is no. That it's true. But I have a lot of trues already, which I know is not the right way to do these things, so I'm going to mark it as provisionally false, because I'm definitely on the fence with it. I'd lean towards slightly more true if I didn't already have like so many falses. How many more do we have left? Oh, yikes. There's still 4 more. 5 more. Whoa, okay. Okay, so I'm actually just going to go with that being true then, because there's so many more. Okay. The internet's strangest red room. This internet mystery takes us to the deep web, the desolate wasteland of the internet where people believe anything goes and a person can easily purchase guns, drugs, and contract killers. In reality, 99% of it is just scams designed to steal your cryptocurrency, and the whole thing runs at what feels like dial-up speeds. We've talked about the rumors of deep red rooms before, and my skepticism that such things even exist, though I'm pretty sure there are instances of it being done on the clear web. For anyone unfamiliar, the phrase a red room is an internet live stream where you pay to watch somebody torture and or kill another person. They're often described as being set up so that users can pay to see specific actions performed. But in 2008, a video began circulating of a much different type of red room. According to both the story and the timecode in the video, it had originally been streamed on the date of November the 5th. It was claimed that the stream showed the murder of 2 criminals, but there was only a single person in the video. The bizarre video was over 4 hours long, but virtually nothing happened. I want to say that it looked like CCTV footage or a hidden camera, but maybe I'm just forgetting how cameras were 16 years ago. Even if it looked like a hidden camera, it eventually became clear that the person in the room knew the camera was there. The person that allegedly killed 2 people in this video. Well, it was some random high school kid. For 4 hours, all he did was sit at his desk studying or doing homework or something. Dude didn't even take a bathroom break. If people actually paid to see this stream expecting to watch an interactive murder, they would certainly have been pissed. The most exciting thing that happened throughout the majority of the video is that the student would occasionally reach into the bag on his desk, take a potato chip, and eat it. However, it was the last minute or so of the video where the actual mystery took hold. The student grabbed a thick Sharpie, wrote something on a piece of paper, and then walked across the room and held the paper up directly to the camera. On the paper were written 2 names, Andrew Urdiales and Virendra Govin. The next day, November the 6th, news broke of the unexpected deaths of 2 people with those names. Whoa. Urdiales was a serial killer, and Govin was a multiple murderer, and both men were found dead in their cells in California's San Quentin State Prison during a routine security check. They were convicted murderers, both sitting on death row, so nobody was too upset about their deaths, but it was still strange. It was assumed that they had committed suicide, but autopsies showed that the most likely cause of death in both instances was cardiac arrest. Oh my god, this is creepy. This is a setup like a mystery book. Following the news story of the bizarre deaths of these inmates, the video of the high school student began spreading across the internet, mostly via gore forums or paranormal message boards. Who was the kid in the video, and how did he know that the 2 murderers were going to die? Could he have been responsible for their deaths, and the alleged Red Room video really did show a double murder? While some people believed there really was a paranormal explanation to this, others engaged in a more sensible line of inquiry. Was the timecode genuine, or had it been added in after the fact or edited in some way? Or could the student have held up a blank piece of paper with the names edited onto it in post-production? The latter seemed unlikely, but there was no way to prove whether or not the timecode was authentic. Instead, the investigation turned toward the kid in the video. There was a school uniform hanging on the closet door, close enough to the camera to get a reasonable look at it. It didn't have a school name visible, but there was a crest. Internet detectives got to work, starting with schools in California since that's where the deaths occurred. After identifying the school, they quickly found a picture of the student on the school's website because he was a member of the varsity tennis team. If I had been a member of the AV club instead of the tennis team, it would have been really easy to write off the whole thing as a prank or a hoax by someone testing their video editing skills. But finding the kid's name suddenly revealed a new angle to the mystery. He was the son of a police captain in the Sacramento area. Suddenly, there was a lot of speculation that this stunt was the kid's way of basically telling on the police department for the extrajudicial murder of 2 inmates. As far as I can tell, however, there was never an official investigation into any such actions, or if there was, the department did it all internally and kept it very quiet. Because the video was circulated around some pretty niche corners of the internet, it never wound up getting the sort of public attention that would result in media pressure on the department. So what do you think happened here, Simon? Was the video just a hoax and the names or timestamps were edited to appear like he was filmed before the deaths occurred? Was the student aware of some corruption within the police department, or are you of the opinion that there's far too many intricate and convoluted details to possibly be a real story? I know it's one of your favorite lines of reasoning with these games, which makes sense. After all, everyone knows the old phrase, fiction is stranger than truth. Yeah, it is. It is. This is like science fiction and fantasy. It's really strange. I think this one's false. Not a website. I've written about a lot of internet mysteries on this channel, which is one of the reasons it took so long to make the next part in this series. It's getting harder and harder to find internet mysteries that I haven't covered yet, so imagine my surprise when I discovered a story about a mysterious website that had gone unsolved for over 20 years. But you can forgive me for not hearing about the website, because it's not a website, or rather, it's not a website.com. From what I can gather, the site was first registered in 1999 and was paid all the way through to 2020 at the time. And yes, the registration was renewed and the site is still active. The original website, which went live in 2001, took you to a plain blank page with a password prompt. In 2003, it was updated to feature an image of The Treachery of Images by painter René Magritte. The painting features a pipe with the caption, "This is not a pipe," in French. That picture has remained the landing page since 2003, and the site is still password protected. When it comes to complex mysteries like Cicada 3301, the first step's always the easiest. However, the first step in this puzzle was entirely too easy. It didn't take long for people to crack the password to unlock the rest of the site, because the password is password. Typing website or literally any number will also work, indicating that somebody probably wants this to be solved. Much to my dismay, not a password is not one of the phrases that will get past the initial prompt. As for what's inside the website, it's a bit maddening because it's always changing. The current page you will see after getting past the homepage is all black, with the poem, "Like a star at dawn, a bubble in a stream, a mirage, an echo, phantom, a dream." Each noun is in a different color font, and there is again a dialogue box where you can put in a keyword. Many of these keywords are either colors or words from that sentence, and they then go to a few new pages featuring images or embedded YouTube videos, often music videos from the 1970s and 80s. I could be more specific, but there's no point. What I've discovered from researching this is that they're always changing. You can find old discussions of this website full of keywords that no longer work or that now show different things than they used to. There is speculation this site is linked to notarealdomain.com, which is another weird but less involved site. That site contains what looked like 7 proposed amendments for some sort of global utopian constitution. The bottom of the page also links to a Reddit mystery thread about the website itself, though the user who created the post has since deleted their account. If you look at the source code of the website, there is hidden text containing what is referred to as a caveman poem, as well as the phrase, "Nothing to see here." There is also a list of dates at the bottom of the page, which has been identified as every time the website was updated since 2010. This was determined by going to notarealdomain.com/images and noticing the date of upload for the image files listed matched some of the dates on the site. People then tried the same trick to see if they could discover more information about Not a Website, but the ability to do so was quickly disabled. Trying to go to the image directory now just goes back to the landing page, except the tab will be titled, "This is not the image folder." That's a nice troll. This change was the closest thing to a definitive link between Not a Website and Not a Real Domain that has ever been discovered. Yeah, I'd say they're pretty linked because of that. People tried looking up the site owners, but only DreamHost and Cows were listed rather than an individual or private company. The fact that the sites were purchased through different web hosting companies might be relevant, but it could also be a red herring. Also, DreamHost, in my personal opinion. What did DreamHost do to you, Kevin? So what exactly is all this nonsense? Well, nobody really knows. The whole thing absolutely reeks of an ARG, alternate reality game, but it's been going for 23 years now, and nobody is any closer to solving this than they were 20 years ago. Anytime people start to make progress, everything changes. Why would somebody make a game that went on this long without having any point or possible ending? The other popular theory is that it's an art project of some sort. I agree, that would certainly make sense, except who would spend decades updating and maintaining something that got so little attention? Then again, trying to understand how an artist's mind works is a fool's errand. Maybe they're an incredibly talented and brilliant artist who gets off on trolling internet strangers. Yeah, it's actually, what's his face, the weird guy with the sharks? Damien Hirst. He's doing it. The real problem with any theory that can be presented is how long this has been going on with no results or official communication. If you scroll through Reddit, you can find a thread created about this website every year for the last however many years, and every single one of them has different information. Any proposed theory crumbles when you examine how often the whole thing has been updated, unless it's just meant to be a puzzle that can't be solved. But who would even have the time and ambition to update this project for so long? Perhaps nobody would. And I just thought it all sounded like a believable story with just enough technical details to make it feel plausible. The elevator game. Oh wait, I've got to give this a thing. I think it's true. Again, this one is like boring. Boring! But in the way that I feel it's true. Like, in the way that I feel Kevin is trying to make me think that it's too boring. It's a game of many levels. Kevin and I are playing three-dimensional chess with each other. The elevator game. This is more of an urban legend than a mystery, but it gained fame through the internet, assuming it's real, so I'm going to count it. It's called the elevator game, and it began in South Korea in 2010. It later exploded in popularity following the death of Elisa Lam, a topic that Simon has already covered on the Casual Criminalist. For those unaware, Elisa died under mysterious circumstances while staying at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. After her death, CCTV footage of her playing the elevator game surfaced, bringing the game to a wider audience. So what is the elevator game, you ask? I've totally forgotten what it was, even though I apparently made an episode all about it. The rules sound a lot like Captain Kirk explaining how to play Fizben, but bear with me for this. You need to go to a building with an elevator and at least 10 floors. The sacred ritual will not work if anybody else is in the elevator with you, so you must do it alone. And oh yeah, did I mention that it's a sacred ritual? Because of course it is. How sacred can it be? How long have elevators been around? Board the elevator on the first floor and take it to the fourth. Don't get out there. Instead, take it to the second floor. Then go to the sixth floor and then back to the second, then the 10th, then the fifth. On the fifth floor, a woman may enter the elevator. You're to treat her like Nigel Tufnell's guitar. Don't even look at her. I don't get the reference. The woman is not human, and if you look at her or talk to her, she may decide to keep you. It's not specified exactly what that means, but it's specified that the woman will be extremely attractive. I don't know how anyone would know this if by looking at her you'll have no means of escape, but when has paranormal bull ever been restricted by logic? Yeah, I'm like, what? You're taking the elevator to different floors randomly? This is some sort of thing that children do. It's like a creepypasta. It's for children. Once she enters, hit the button for the first floor. If the elevator takes you to the first floor, then the ritual has failed. You must leave the building without ever speaking or looking back. But if it instead goes to the 10th floor, when you exit the elevator, you'll be taken to a parallel dimension. This will look exactly like your own dimension, except the lights will be off and you'll be able to see a big red cross outside the hotel windows. Electronics conveniently don't work in the other world, so you can't take any sort of photographic or video proof that it worked either. Of course you can't. This is such nonsense. I mean, it's nonsense, obviously. That's clear. Is it nonsense Kevin made up, or is it nonsense that is just nonsense?
I guess I'm too old for that sort of nonsense anymore.
This feels kind of like something that would be in one of Kevin's mangas or something, right? I feel like this would be like, this was maybe some really popular story from some media that I've never consumed, and Kevin's just turned into a urban legend. So I'm leaning towards false. To return to your home world, you must go back to the elevator you stepped out of and repeat the entire ritual again. At the end, when the elevator starts ascending to the 10th floor, you need to press another button to stop it before it reaches the top, and then take it back down to the first floor. Only leave once you're sure everything is normal and you're back in your own world, otherwise you may need to perform the exit ritual again. It's also possible that you might bring back some otherworldly contagion with you, or a malevolent spirit that will follow you to your world. Still awake, Simon? Oh, yes, barely, Kevin. I know it was a bunch of dumb, complicated instructions for obviously fake, mystical bullshit. I also know that this obviously sounds like some sort of creepypasta nonsense that definitely would exist on the internet. But it's also the sort of nonsense that might exist in some spooky anime. Exactly. This could be the plot of Has-Been Hotel, for all you know. Indeed. I don't even know if Has-Been Hotel is real. Of course, the fact that I said that probably makes you think you suspect this is real, and I'm trying entirely too hard to steer you towards this being fake. But you also have a terrible track record of being consistently fooled by anime plots in this game, so perhaps I'm just fully taunting you at this point because I know you'll never get it right, even if I flat out tell you what anime it's from. So, with mind games out of the way, was the elevator game that something people played and it spread across the internet after being tied to the death of Elisa Lam? Or was it something else entirely, like a creepypasta anime plot or random nonsense I made up because it sounded like the type of crap that people would love to circulate online? I think it's exactly that, Kevin. I think it's false because I don't remember this from the Elisa Lam episode. I just remember her going up and down. I don't remember anything about an elevator game. I just remember her being in the elevator and looking out and like being all paranoid and shit. So I think it's false. Wanking the worm. Okay. This entry is by far the oldest internet mystery we've covered. In fact, it's so old that most people didn't even know the internet existed yet because the first internet service providers were still rolling out coverage on a regional basis. The year was 1989, and NASA was set to launch the Galileo space probe that would study Jupiter and its moons eventually. It took about 6 years for NASA to get to Jupiter. The launch was set for about 5 p.m. on October the 18th, but on October the 16th, NASA employees encountered a bit of difficulty. Someone, somehow, had hacked NASA. When users logged into their computers, they were met with the message, "Worms against nuclear killers. Wank. Your system has officially been wanked." It had been 1 year since an MIT student made headlines with the first internet worm, something for which he received a felony conviction. Holy shit. You just like making some program, not realizing what you're doing. So while that opening certainly makes it sound like this worm was a playful prank, the parties involved would have known what was really at stake by doing this. At the bottom of the message was the text, "You talk of times of peace for all and then prepare for war." This was a reference to the song Blossom and Blood by the Australian rock band Midnight Oil. Sounds quite real. It's very specific. After this initial message appeared, the worm would then run an algorithm that displayed one of several randomized messages. It might say, "Vote anarchist," "The FBI is watching you," or it could show a commands prompt dialogue revealing that it was in the process of deleting all the computer's files, or so it claimed anyway. The worm was meant to be an inconvenience, not meant to actually damage the system, so nothing was actually deleted. Of course, that didn't stop NASA supervisors from demanding that the infected computers be completely wiped to stop the spread of the worm. That's a fun story and all, but why would NASA be the target of an anti-nuclear activism rather than the military? The answer is Galileo, a nuclear-powered probe fueled with plutonium. This was during the Cold War, so anything nuclear was inherently terrifying to people. It's also worth noting that just 3 years earlier, in 1986, the world witnessed both the Chernobyl disaster and the Challenger explosion. Yeah. So ships can blow up on their launch, up in the sky, yeah? And nuclear power plants can too. What if we put a nuclear power plant aboard a spaceship and blew it up in the atmosphere? It's like, of course people would be afraid.
What could go wrong?
NASA was now threatening to combine both of those events by strapping a nuclear reactor onto a rocket. If something went wrong, the results could be devastating. Of course, nothing did go wrong. NASA quickly adopted an anti-wank procedure, which would stop the worm from spreading, and Galileo was launched as planned. But a few days later, it started up again. The hackers had oiled up their hands and had taken their wank game to a whole new level, which is to say that an updated version of the worm called Oils started infecting NASA computers. This time, the worm was much less playful. Unlike wank, which was simply meant to scare users and send a political message, Oils would change the user passwords to lock people out of the computers entirely. Both worms utilized similar exploits, with the main exploit being passwords that were extremely shitty back in the day. System-level passwords were routinely the same as the username, and the worms were able to easily enter the system using these passwords. There was no complex hacking algorithm or anything. The worms just came with a pre-programmed list of common username and password combinations, and that was enough to break into 1980s-era NASA computers. Despite this having taken place 35 years ago, holy shit, I'm old, but despite that, the culprit has never been identified. Based on the source code and comments contained within, it's believed that wank and oils were written by two different people, or possibly two different groups, if they weren't each created by lone renegades. It was also clearly made by ideologues, rather than using nuclear power as a smokescreen to disguise the true nature of exploiting the vulnerabilities in NASA's DECnet. The worms were designed to jump from one network address to another completely at random, but not to NASA-affiliated stations in New Zealand. The portion of the code that prevented New Zealand computers from being infected included comments stating that New Zealand was a nuclear-free zone, which was indeed their official stance. Theoretically, this could have just been part of a smokescreen, but it seems unlikely, especially since the first virus wasn't doing anything particularly malicious anyway. It has been speculated that whoever created the virus was from Australia, but that's as far as it really got. Midnight Oil, who are commonly referred to as Oils by fans, aren't exactly an international sensation. Use of the word wank also suggests that it wasn't an American. We know what the word means, but nobody actually uses it here. According to the Australian Federal Police, it was possibly two Australian hackers known as Electron and Phoenix. Both hackers were arrested in a 1990 raid and charged with numerous crimes related to the intrusion in US government computer systems, but they were never officially charged with wanking NASA's computers off. There is even speculation that Australian founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, was involved in the wankworm. Assange, who was 18 at the time, was a member of the same hacking group as Electron and Phoenix, and he has referred to the worm as the origin of hacktivism. His involvement has never been proven, but it certainly isn't out of the realm of possibility. I think this is false. This has got false vibes. Like throwing in Julian Assange. I feel that killed it for me, Kevin. That kind of killed it for me. Maybe I'm wrong. Could totally be wrong. Unless you happen to think that this entire story is out of the realm of possibility. I mean, sure, some of the details about the Galileo launch and NASA's infrastructure are definitely true, but what about the mysterious worm that's never been traced? Maybe I was writing about the Galileo probe for side projects while listening to Midnight Oil, and I was inspired to write this story because I knew you wouldn't know a damn thing about computer worms from when you were a toddler. Or maybe I'm once again trying too hard to steer you away from the fact that this story is obviously true. I don't think it is. I think it's false. And we'll move on to number 10 today, the final one. Taylor Swift on 4chan. Oh, I'm already leaning to this being false. There's something that many of us take for granted, and that's that nobody gives a shit about who we are or what we say. It doesn't sound like a great thing when I frame it like that, but it's also something that many celebrities don't get to enjoy. We all get to go about our meaningless little lives in total anonymity, while everything a celebrity does or doesn't do is placed under a microscope and debated to no end by the public. It's why there's even a special group of psychologists known as wealth psychologists, people who specialize in helping the ultra-wealthy deal with the sort of problems that us plebeians couldn't possibly understand. You know what they say? What are you? I'm a wealth psychologist. My motto, more money, more problems. Sometimes a celebrity just wishes they could be anonymous. So what better way to do that than by joining Anonymous? More specifically, the anonymous image board 4chan, home to trolls, conspiracy theorists, hacktivists, and possibly even Taylor Swift. Like I said, 4chan is full of trolls, so people pretending to be random celebrities or other important people is nothing new. Q of QAnon fame claimed to be a government insider with Q-level security clearance, and many people have posed as celebrities in the past. Usually these posts are dismissed as obvious hoaxes, but it was different with Taylor. The user never once claimed they were Taylor Swift, at least not outright. It began in 2009, when a random user posted on /B, "Hi /B, I'm feeling down. Please make me smile." Attached was an image of a blonde girl from the nose down who definitely bore a resemblance to Taylor. Wanting to identify who this person was, other Anons eventually identified a vlog post from Taylor which showed the same distinctive couch placed in front of wooden blinds in the background. It didn't prove that Taylor was the poster, just that the original image was of her. Over the next 3 years, the same account would continue to make occasional posts. One invited people to ask one of the 50 most famous people on the planet anything except my name. Wow. That's kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy. Other than vague claims being made, there was nothing to make this any more believable than the other celebrity hoaxes. Nothing until late 2011, that is. On December 28th, the user posted an image holding a tablet at the beach. On the tablet was the message, "Sup /B, nothing quite like a freezing cold wintry beach." Also, rule number 1. Rule number 1 is related to not talking about /B and not particularly important for this. What is important is that the EXIF data on the image showed that it was taken at 12:28 in the afternoon. 6 hours later, Taylor posted a picture of herself at the beach on Twitter and Instagram with the caption, "Nothing quite like a freezing cold wintry beach." Wow, okay. That is a hell of a coincidence. It was certainly compelling, but what happened a month earlier was even more interesting. On November the 6th, the user posted a picture of a cat with the message, "Trips names my new kitten." Every post and reply on 4chan is given a number in sequential order, but the numbers are sequential across all of the different boards and threads. This means there is no realistic way to control what your number will be. Trips meant a person whose post number ended with the same digit 3 times, so this was essentially a lottery. People could post a random name, then they could get to see whether or not their post number ended in trips. The submissions were mostly what you would expect from 4chan, names like Rudy Poo, Dragon, Jisms, and Poodyroo. But the first person to get trips suggested the name Meredith. The next day, US Magazine and other news outlets ran with the story that despite being on tour, Taylor had adopted a cat and named it Meredith. Well, they say she adopted it, but it was a Scottish fold, so realistically she purchased it for $3,000. It's not impossible that this could have been a coincidence, but Meredith is both a dumb name for a cat and the sort of thing that 4chan users would be expected to recommend. At the very least, I'd have expected something like Meredith, Slayer of Cucks, rather than just a single ordinary name. Those two coincidences would have already been enough to convince people that this was really Taylor, but in a bizarre turn of events, the site owner's Moot actually replied to a thread and said that according to the user's IP, it was definitely not her. This was suspicious for a couple of reasons. To start, the IP didn't prove anything. Yeah, and Moot would know this. Like, he's a big brain computer dude, and people who use 4chan probably going to be more into computers than the average person. So he knows that that's not giving any useful information, and the people he's giving it to know that they know he knows that. I don't know who today's sponsor is, but if you've been watching Simon for any amount of time or have existed anywhere on the internet in the past decade, then you've certainly been aware of the existence of VPNs. More importantly, why would Moot actually come out and say something? It was very rare for him to post at all, and never to debunk one fake celebrity thing. Was he trying to protect Taylor? They both attended the Vanity Fair Oscar night after party in 2011, so perhaps they became friends, and then she was a regular since then she was a regular 4chan user. It was all enough to convince 4chan users that Taylor was one of them, but has it been enough to convince you that it really happened? After all, if they were willing to believe that Q was a genuine government insider, then obviously people were willing to believe anything. I think it's false. I think Kevin made this one up because it's a cool story. I really like the story, but I think it's false. And that's the end. Let's watch Kevin's video and see how we did. Okay, so I've True, false, true, 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 false, true, false, false, false. Let's go.
Welcome back, everyone. It's time to find out how you did. Also, I don't have the same sick teleprompter reading skills as Simon, so you'll have to forgive wherever my eyes happen to be going while I'm reading my script.
You're doing good.
First up was Senor Flagrante, and this is quite probably the most brazen entry I've ever included in one of these episodes. Nobody expects you to know anime, Simon, but could I possibly fool you with one of the most popular cartoons of all time? This was an adaptation of the Mr. Sparkle storyline in which Homer Simpson discovered he was a mascot for a Japanese dish detergent.
Oh, I
the
have
name Rory
seen
Bellows
that.
was also the fake name used by Krusty the Clown after faking his own death.
I'm not
So,
a
there's your
huge
answer.
Simpsons head, though.
Next up, am I the asshole? If I once again lose to you at my own game, then yes, clearly I am. But as for the story itself, this wasn't so much an internet mystery as it was just a story from my childhood. The name Lucky Prophet is my name from the Wu-Tang Clan name generator, but that role in the story was actually played by my parents. This was just a thing that happened on the street where I grew up, and everyone was pretty sure that one of the girls that lived in that house was a mafia princess even before her abusive boyfriend was taken away in the middle of the night. That brings us to Squidward Fan 1982.
Got it.
And this one is real. While most of the updates
Yes.
Potato had made to the deceased YouTube wiki were accurate, at least a couple were clearly intended to be jokes. It's not clear if this one was also supposed to be a joke that just wasn't funny, or if there was a YouTube channel under this name that is now lost media. Weirdly enough, someone else on YouTube has now taken that name. It's a Russian user, and many of the search results when trying to find information about Squidward Fan turn up Russian phishing sites, though I have no idea why this would be the case. Moving on to Polybius, this is something I actually briefly mentioned on an earlier episode of the Internet's Deepest Mysteries while talking about the lost game Yeah Yeah Beavis 1, though I knew there was no way you would remember that. Polybius was very much a real internet mystery, but it was obviously not a real game. It was just a hoax created by someone in the late 90s for the hell of it.
But I get
It
it
was also
because
cited by author Ernest Cline as being
it was a
major
true
source
internet
of
mystery.
inspiration for the book Ready Player One, so I hope everyone who helped spread this story feels very ashamed of themselves. That brings us to the disappearing football player. I know you wouldn't have noticed this, Simon, even though I made sure to put both things in the same paragraph for you, but the name J22's Gillette is an anagram for just a little guy. This is a story that I made up entirely, and honestly it was a bit too ambitious to try to fit into 1,000 words or less. I really doubt you fell for this one unless I was able to actually break your focus by talking about football.
You did. You did.
And of course, the part that everyone watching at home is waiting for, the internet's strangest red room. This story was inspired by the famous potato chip scene from the anime Death Note.
Yes, I got this one right because I said it was false.
But this scene is the perfect testament to how voice actors can deliver the most ridiculous dialogue with an incredible amount of gravitas. But while the overall story was inspired by Death Note, and no part of this was ever an internet mystery, the two death row inmates I mentioned really did die in their cells at nearly the same time. It was a weird coincidence, but it had nothing to do with cartoon demons. Next up is Not a Website, which is in fact a website. When I found it, I actually considered pitching an entire episode on the mystery rather than using it for this game.
said
But
this
whether
one
it's
was
an
true.
art project,
Yes.
an ARG, or some complex
art
puzzle,
project.
the contents of the website change too frequently for anyone to make any real progress. If I tried to write a full 30 to 60 minute episode about Not a Website, I would have just wound up bashing my head against the keyboard in frustration because none of it makes sense or has any clear purpose. That does make it seem like it's most likely an art project, but it's been going on for such a long time that it is some serious dedication if it is. Moving on to something with a more definitive answer, there's the elevator game. Yes, this was a real game people played, and yes, it exploded in popularity after the death of Elisa Lam.
Wow.
There are some videos on YouTube of people playing the game that have got tens of millions of views. And just so we're clear, an elevator cannot take you to an alternate dimension. And this whole thing is insanely stupid. Also, although Elisa's behavior in the elevator was definitely strange, nothing she did is even close to the bullshit convoluted rules of the elevator game.
Yes.
That brings us to the wank worm.
Okay, I got that wrong
And
next. I
there's
said it was false.
not really much to say about this one because everything I wrote is completely true and it's pretty much the entire story. Even if Electron, Phoenix, and
Wow.
Julian Assange are believed to have been involved, there's never been anything to definitively tie them to the attacks. So finally,
okay.
there's the matter of Taylor Swift. Would someone as famous as Taylor actually browse on 4chan? I mean, maybe, but the account in question wasn't her. The story was true, and there are still people that are convinced it was Taylor, but the entire thing has been fully debunked. For example, all of the pictures uploaded were eventually found to have been posted elsewhere on earlier dates, and Taylor announced her cat's name.
Wow,
online
okay.
days before
So
the
I said it
final
was
4chan,
false. It was false,
even
but
though the
Kevin
media
made it up.
didn't
Didn't make it up.
until the day after. And I'm not entirely sure why the media felt the need to report it at all anyway. Anyway, it's been fun definitely recording this inside your office and not in front of a green screen. And I look forward to seeing how you did. Unless you beat me. Again.
Well, good news, Kevin. I didn't beat you, but you didn't beat me. 5 out of 10. So, even Stevens. This was great. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, whoever's watching this, audience. Appreciate you. Leave a review if you like this show, wherever you get your podcast. If you watch it on YouTube, like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.